unpopular Star Trek opinions. We all have them, and now it's time to talk about them. Hey, it's Janelle Waz, and welcome back to another episode of Defend Yourself. You guys liked the first Defend Yourself video and wanted to see it become a regular series, so here we are. Defend Yourself will be an occasional video series on Tuesdays. And I especially wanted to do a Defend Yourself video today because it's my birthday, and I feel like talking about Star Trek.
I love surprise parties.
So gather round with a piece of cake as I talk about some of my more unpopular Star Trek opinions. Today's topic of conversation, Worf and Deanna Troi. No, not that failed romance that nobody could get behind. So,
defend yourself.
But before I go further, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I talk a lot about Star Trek, video games, and whatever else I feel like talking about. And if you'd like to help support the channel, consider becoming a member. Be great to have you aboard.
Lieutenant Commander Worf, reporting for duty, sir.
DS9 and Next Gen are my top Star Trek shows, and both feature Starfleet's favorite Klingon, Worf. Though Worf would join DS9 at the start of its 4th season. Worf served as Chief of Security on Next Gen, and in an attempt to make certain situations seem more dire, the writers had Worf's ass kicked. A lot.
Now show me your warrior fierceness.
Because we always wanted to see one of the toughest members of the crew, second only to Data, get owned by the Borg, random Ferengi, a possessed Deanna Troi, railings, and even a barrel.
Revenge is mine!
Heck, how many times did Worf have legitimate security concerns only to be shut down by Picard, Riker, and even Beverly Crusher?
The colony is completely lawless.
I can handle myself.
Heck, it was almost shocking to see Riker listen to Worf's professional opinion that maybe they shouldn't let the Romulans have full access to the computer and maybe only let them look at basically Windows 95.
We cannot give them access to Federation technology. That is an unacceptable security risk.
What about a computer core from 30 or 40 years ago?
That would be satisfactory.
Then Worf made his way over to DS9 after Star Trek Generations, but not as Chief of Security because, let's face it, Odo's already hung up drapes in his office. He's not leaving it. But instead as Strategic Operations Officer, trading his gold uniform for a red one. Relax, he's in DS9. What's that? Sisko's actually taking Worf's advice seriously? Worf's actually presented as a formidable warrior? Heck, even when he's getting beat up by the Jem'Hadar in a prison camp, he comes across more like Rocky, taking the beating but still getting back up, earning everyone's, even the Jem'Hadar he was fighting's, respect.
I cannot defeat this Klingon. All I can do is kill him. And that no longer holds my interest.
In many ways, Worf was taken far more seriously in DS9, both in show and from the audience's perspective, than compared to Next Gen. And yet, in spite of all that, I actually prefer Worf on Next Gen over DS9, and it's for a couple of reasons. For one thing, Worf simply fit in better with the Enterprise crew and had more chemistry with them. Sure, he was always stoic and standoffish.
Worf, the big guy who never smiles?
But he made more of an effort to socialize with his fellow crewmates and was even friends with many of them. Playing Parisi squares, joining in on poker games, multiple times, having drinks in 10 forward while giving Geordi advice about women.
You must let her see the fire in your eyes.
Heck, even teaching martial arts classes. And sure, there were times he was discounted, or even badgered. Beverly, quit asking for Worf's blood!
It's not too late to change your mind.
But he belonged to a community on the Enterprise. A community that saw that he was upset and threw him a Klingon coming-of-age party in the holodeck. A community that knew it was his birthday and threw him a surprise party, even though he hated it. Well, it's the thought that counts. A community that saw he was raising a young son alone and made allowances for him. He had pride in his Klingon heritage, sure, but wasn't afraid to interact with his non-Klingon crewmates, even enjoying their company in his own Worf way. Compare that to Worf in DS9. He's very stiff and standoffish, more so than he ever was on the Enterprise. Even, dare I say it, unwilling to adapt to living on the station.
Sooner or later, you're going to have to adapt.
Perhaps in the end, it'll be all of you that have to adapt to me.
You see, it's lines like that that make me think these things, Worf. For the most part, he doesn't really interact with a lot of people when off duty on DS9, outside of a handful of people. Heck, he moved his quarters over to the Defiant just to get away from everyone. He ends up being more of an outsider on DS9 rather than joining a new community. No poker parties, no Parisi squares, no martial arts classes. Heck, I'm surprised anyone knew he had a kid. Even Martok was surprised and Worf joined his house. And sadly, Worf didn't have much chemistry with the DS9 cast, even with Jadzia, his eventual wife. It felt like he was never fully comfortable with his new crew, at least not in the way he was with his Enterprise crew. Maybe it's an unintended consequence of joining the crew a few seasons into the show when characters already had relationships developed with each other. But, and I say this as somebody who likes Worf even on DS9, he never fully fit in. The other point I give off to DS9 Worf is that the writers ignore the fact that Worf was raised by human parents, and while he always had a fascination with his Klingon heritage, there was still a part of him that looked towards Earth as his home. In Next Gen, Guinan makes an observation to Worf's human parents that while there's a part of him that's very Klingon, there's another part of him that looks out the window towards home, Earth and his human parents.
He's not looking towards the Klingon Empire. He's looking towards you.
DS9 basically abandoned that idea, and Worf was mostly Klingon, Klingon, Klingon. It was an interesting concept, Worf being torn between his two halves, and DS9, a show with deep character development, mostly ignores it. While Worf certainly isn't terrible on DS9, he just doesn't fit in as well in that show as he did on Next Gen. Therefore, I prefer him on Next Gen.
The Enterprise I knew is gone. Those were good years. But now it is time for me to move on.
I'd appreciate it if you wore a standard uniform when you're on duty.
Of course, sir.
Okay, this opinion is purely from an aesthetic viewpoint and has absolutely no basis in Starfleet protocol. But I prefer Troi in her civilian wear. And yes, I know there was absolutely no reason she couldn't wear a uniform and should have been in one from the start. I don't care. I like her outfits.
Why?
Like any military organization, or whatever the heck Starfleet is, Starfleet officers are expected to wear uniforms. If you look at the cast of other Star Trek shows, almost everyone is wearing a uniform. I say almost everyone because there are some exceptions to this rule with an explanation attached. Major Kira on DS9 didn't wear a Starfleet uniform until late in the show, but she wasn't in Starfleet. She was in the Bajoran militia. Same goes with Odo, only what group was he affiliated with? Was he his own man the entire time?
Well, I'm not in Starfleet.
In Voyager, Seven, while a major part of ship's operations, wasn't in Starfleet either, so she wore her Borg jumpsuits. T'Pol in Enterprise was the first officer, but also didn't wear a uniform because, again, she wasn't in Starfleet. She was with the Vulcan High Command. Dr. Phlox also wasn't in Starfleet, but instead was with the Interspecies Medical Exchange, serving as CMO. But then we come back to Next Gen and Counselor Deanna Troi. Does Troi have any real excuse not to wear a uniform? No, she's in Starfleet. Heck, she's a lieutenant commander. Why wouldn't she be in uniform? Heck, even Captain Jellicoe made her wear a uniform because there was no reason for her not to be in one. Which makes me wonder why Picard never said anything. I mean, Riker almost threw a hissy fit over Ro wearing an earring, which had deep meaning for Bajorans, but Troi gets to wear that? Now, the in-universe explanation why Troi opted to wear civilian wear is because, as counselor, she wanted to make her patients feel more comfortable in a less formal setting. At least that's the in-universe reason. Why Marina Sirtis was put in form-fitting outfits, well, we can only assume. But nevertheless, she looked great in those outfits. Okay, the belted season 1 jumpsuit was a miss, and let's not even get into that uniform from Encounter at Farpoint. But her outfits, while not elaborately decorated, were nice and flattered her. I personally like her teal dress with the matching tights and shoes. It's a nice color, it's a nice cut, and it's feminine. I like it. But anyways, while I have cracked many a joke about Troi wearing her outfits on duty, and I acknowledge that Troi should have been in a uniform the entire time, I still resent Jellicoe's order for Deanna to wear a uniform because I liked her outfits.
Captain, I'm not really dressed for a reception.
Oh, come, sir, just throw on any old thing.
And those are some of my unpopular Star Trek opinions. So, what do you think? Did I defend myself well? Am I way off the starbase, or do you disagree with me but can see where I'm coming from? Or do you agree with me and think I made some good points? And what are some of your unpopular Star Trek opinions? Please, leave comments below and discuss. As always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Defend Yourself. If you like what you see, why not give my video a like and subscribe to my channel? Tell your friends! Until next time...
How old are you? Old enough.